Hey everybody, it's Mr. Duarte back with another writing tips video from the MA Writing Center. In this video, we're going to explain and go over the steps for writing an introduction specifically for an analytical essay on a piece of literature such as a novel, play, poem, or short story using the T.A.G.S.T formula. If you are writing a different kind of essay or paper, such as a persuasive essay or a research paper, we will be covering how to write those types of introductions in a later video. There's a lot to go over in this video as I will be showing you two different ways to complete an introduction, and I will not be reading everything that is on the screen, so you may need to pause it every once in a while, especially to look at the completed introductions at the end to see how everything comes together. So, let's get to it. Before we begin going over the steps for writing an introduction using the T.A.G.S.T formula, let's first go over what T.A.G.S.T stands for, what the formula looks like, as well as what the sentence structure of the introduction looks like when you use it. Now, I'm sure you've heard of the TAG formula, T-A-G, which also stands for title, author, genre, and is often used by teachers as a reminder to students of what they need to incorporate in their introductions, and sometimes when using quotes. We are extending that formula a bit for our discussion of introductions. Introducing T.A.G.S.T. Not as nice sounding or pretty to look at, but it is just as effective. T.A.G.S.T, or T-A.G.S.T, stands for title, author, genre, summary, and thesis. Basically, the formula looks like this: title plus author plus genre plus summary plus your thesis equals a solid introduction. Now, don't worry, we will be going more in depth on how to use this formula in a few moments. For standard essays that are 4 to 5 paragraphs in length, your introduction should be between 4 to 5 sentences long. This can vary, though, depending on what your teacher is looking for, so be sure to always ask them if you are not sure. Here's a breakdown of each sentence in the introduction when using the T.A.G.S.T formula. If you're writing a standard 4 to 5 paragraph analytical essay about a piece of literature and your introduction will be between 4 to 5 sentences long, the first sentence of your introduction should include a hook, only if you're comfortable, or an opening sentence using keywords from your essay prompt. The second, third, and possibly fourth sentences will be dedicated to a bare-bones summary of the piece of literature that incorporates the title, author, and genre of the piece of literature. This bare-bones summary of the piece of literature should only cover the basic elements of the plot and should mention any characters you are going to be discussing in your essay. Note here that the fourth sentence can either be the last part of your summary or a sentence that leads into your thesis statement. We will get to more of this later. Your final sentence should be your thesis statement. If you did not use a full sentence to lead into your thesis, add a transitional phrase at the beginning of your thesis statement that leads into it. Again, do not worry, we will be going over all of this in a few moments. Okay, now with all of that introductory material out of the way, let's go over the 4 steps for how to write a solid introduction using the T.A.G.S.T formula. We will go in depth into each one in a few moments, but for now, let's just see what the steps are. Step number 1, have your title, author, genre, and thesis statement ready before you begin writing. Step number 2, the opening sentence. Address your essay prompt in the first sentence of your introduction using key words from the prompt to help you. Step number 3, sentences number 2 to number 4. Write a brief 2 to 3 sentence bare-bones summary of the piece of literature you are writing about, incorporating its title, author, and genre, the TAG. Finally, step number 4, where you create a lead-in transitional phrase or a full sentence lead-in to your thesis statement before adding it to the end of your introduction. Now that we are done with an overview of this 4-step process of creating an introduction, let's dive right in and go over each step in more depth. Step number 1, have your title, author, genre, and thesis ready before you begin writing. For our example, we are going to be writing an introduction to the following essay prompt that asks us to analyze Robert Southey's fairy tale Goldilocks and the Three Bears by asking this question: what morals are hidden in the fairy tale of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and how are they revealed? So we have our title, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, we have our author, Robert Southey, and we have our genre, fairy tale. And we've also written our thesis for the essay, which should always be done before you start to actually write your essay. Here is our example thesis. Through Goldilocks' actions and the Three Bears' reactions, Southey suggests that we must think about the effect our actions can have on others before we perform them. Now that we have our title, author, genre, and thesis down, it's time to start writing our introduction. So how do we start? Let's pause for a moment to discuss one way you've probably been taught to start an essay. There are many ways to start an introduction, and most of you have probably been taught to start your essays off with what is called a hook. A hook is an attention-grabbing opening statement for your essay. Teachers will sometimes suggest starting your essay off with a quote or a question that pertains to what you will be talking about in the essay, so that you'll get the reader hooked right off the bat. The problem with doing this is many students either choose random quotes that have nothing to do with their essay prompt or ask a question that they end up not answering in their essay. Some students find the hook very hard to come up with and say it can be the most stressful part of writing an essay. To avoid this, it is suggested that you only use a hook if you are comfortable doing so. Let's move on to step number 2 to show you a different strategy for writing a good first sentence for your essay. Step number 2, the opening sentence. Address your essay prompt in the first sentence of your introduction using key words from the prompt to help you. So what do you do instead of a hook? One way is to simply address your essay prompt or topic in your opening sentence. Let's first go over some do's and don'ts for this strategy, and then we will go over an example. First, do make sure to address the essay prompt or topic in your opening sentence, and while doing this, make sure that you do use key words from the prompt to help you form the opening sentence. As for what not to do, or the don'ts, first, don't start out with, "In this essay I will be discussing." You do not use first person, I or me, in an analytical essay unless it is part of a quote. Also, although you can use keywords from the prompt, don't copy the prompt word for word. You need to formulate your own sentence. And finally, don't start your introduction with your thesis statement, as this is supposed to be the last sentence of your introduction. So how the heck do we use keywords from the essay prompt without copying the prompt word for word? Well, let's take a look at our example essay prompt to see how we can do this. As a reminder, here is our essay prompt question. What morals are hidden in the fairy tale of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and how are they revealed? Let's take out some key words from the prompt. Morals, hidden, fairy tale, revealed, to help us come up with the first sentence of our essay. So we know we are dealing with the revelation of hidden morals in a fairy tale. So let's use these keywords to form a good opening sentence for our essay introduction. Here is our opening sentence. Children's fairy tales usually contain obvious morals at the end of them for children to learn and grow from. But in some of these stories, the morals might be hidden and not just revealed at the end of the tale, but throughout it as well. Notice we used all of the key words we pulled from the essay prompt to form our opening sentence. The words morals, hidden, fairy tale, and revealed are all key words that appear in this opening sentence. Now with our opening sentence complete, we can move on to step number 3. Step number 3, sentences number 2 through number 4. Write a brief 2 to 3 sentence bare bones summary of the piece of literature you are writing about, incorporating its title, author, and genre, or the TAG. The next step is to write sentences 2, 3, and 4 of the introduction, which will contain the title, author, and genre of the literature, as well as a summary of it. The first sentence of the summary, which is sentence number 2 of your introduction, should lead into the summary and include the TAG, the title of the work, the author's full name, and the genre of the piece of literature. The summary of the literature itself should be brief, which can be difficult to do with longer pieces. So in order to do this, we need to write what is called a bare bones summary. In a bare bones summary, you strip the work to its bare bones, a skeleton of the plot, and form those bare bone parts into summary sentences, making sure to mention any characters you will be discussing in your essay. The important thing to remember is to not get too specific with your summary. You want to say specific events for your body paragraphs. When I say brief, I mean brief. A summary no longer than 2 sentences is a good rule to follow. But if you need one more sentence, make the summary 3 sentences max. While this can be difficult to do when you have a long novel to summarize, with practice you can actually get it done pretty quickly. We're going to keep our summary to 2 sentences for this example to show you how it can be done. Now let's first narrow Goldilocks and the Three Bears down to the bare bones of the story. Goldilocks enters an unlocked house she finds in the forest. She eats porridge, breaks a chair, and sleeps in one of the beds. The bears come home and she runs away in fright. So let's turn these plot points into the first few sentences of our introduction that keeps the details broad, but also includes the title, author, and genre in our first sentence. Here is our bare bones summary. Robert Southey's fairy tale Goldilocks and the Three Bears tells the story of a little girl named Goldilocks who is on a walk in the forest and comes upon an empty, unlocked house. Upon entering the house, she decides to not only eat food that is sitting out, but also test the owner's furniture and eventually falls asleep in a bed until the three bears who own the house discover her and she runs away in fright. Now look at that. We got the author, title, and genre packed in these two summary sentences, along with all of the characters we are going to mention in our essay, and we kept the actions of all the characters broad. We will save the specifics about how Goldilocks tries each bowl of porridge, each chair, and each bed for our body paragraphs. Now it's time to finish up our introduction with step number 4. Step number 4. Create a lead-in transitional phrase or a full sentence lead-in to your thesis statement before adding it to the end of your introduction. While your thesis statement should come at the end of your introduction, you need to connect it to your summary sentences by creating a transitional phrase attached to the thesis or by writing a full sentence that leads the reader smoothly into your thesis statement. Let's remind you of our thesis statement for the essay. Let's show you what both a transitional phrase and a lead-in sentence can look like using this thesis. Let's start with a lead-in transitional phrase. So what is a lead-in transitional phrase? A transitional phrase is not a full sentence and will be actually attached to the start of your thesis statement, so it becomes a part of it. Basically, it is a longer transition at the start of the thesis that connects your thesis to the bare bones summary. Since we are looking for and analyzing a moral message hidden within Goldilocks and the Three Bears, let's mention this in the transitional phrase, since we already have the moral in the thesis statement. Here is our thesis statement with the transitional phrase attached. A hidden moral becomes apparent as the fairy tale concludes, and through Goldilocks' actions and the bear's reactions, Southey suggests that we must think about the effect our actions can have on others before we perform them. As you can see, we have attached a short transitional phrase to the beginning of our thesis statement that connects it to our summary and leads into our thesis. Now, let's take a look at our completed introduction with the transitional lead-in phrase added to the thesis. Go ahead and pause the video to read the completed introduction. Children's fairy tales usually contain obvious morals at the end of them for children to learn and grow from, but in some of these stories, the morals might be hidden and not just revealed at the end of the tale, but throughout it as well. Robert Southey's fairy tale Goldilocks and the Three Bears tells the story of a little girl named Goldilocks who is on a walk in the forest and comes upon an empty, unlocked house. Upon entering the house, she decides to not only eat food that is sitting out, but also tests the owner's furniture and eventually falls asleep in a bed until the three bears who own the house discover her and she runs away in fright. A hidden moral becomes apparent as the fairy tale concludes, and through Goldilocks' actions and the bear's reactions, Southey suggests that we must think about the effect our actions can have on others before we perform them. With the transitional lead-in phrase, we have a solid 4-sentence introduction here that includes the title, author, genre, a bare-bones summary, and your thesis. Now, let's show you how to add a full sentence lead-in to your thesis. A full sentence lead-in is exactly how it sounds. Rather than a phrase attached to your thesis, it is a full, unattached sentence that leads into your thesis. The full sentence lead-in becomes sentence number 4 of your introduction. Just like the lead-in transitional phrase, the full sentence lead-in must connect your thesis to the bare-bones summary. Now, let's add a full sentence lead-in to connect the summary and the thesis. Again, since the thesis statement is about the moral of the story, let's incorporate that into our lead-in sentence since the moral itself is already contained in the thesis statement. Here's our lead-in sentence. Although seemingly simple in nature, the fairy tale actually has a meaningful moral hidden within it that most readers tend to miss. Now, just add your thesis statement to the end of the paragraph and you're finished. Let's see how it looks when all of this is put together using a full lead-in sentence. Go ahead and pause the video to read the complete introduction. Children's fairy tales usually contain obvious morals at the end of them for children to learn and grow from. But in some of these stories, the morals might be hidden and not just revealed at the end of the tale, but throughout it as well. Robert Southey's fairy tale Goldilocks and the Three Bears tells the story of a little girl named Goldilocks who is on a walk in the forest and comes upon an empty, unlocked house. Upon entering the house, she decides to not only eat food that is sitting out, but also test the owner's furniture, and eventually falls asleep in a bed until the three bears who own the house discover her and she runs away in fright. Although seemingly simple in nature, the fairy tale actually has a meaningful moral hidden within it that most readers tend to miss. Through Goldilocks' actions and the bears' reactions, Southey suggests that we must think about the effect our actions can have on others before we perform them. With the full sentence lead-in, we have a solid 5-sentence introduction that includes the title, author, genre, a bare-bones summary, and our thesis. Using the T.A.G.S.T formula, we have included the title, author, genre, summary, and thesis in both of these solid introductions. The only difference between the two is that the transitional phrase example has 4 sentences, while the lead-in sentence example has 5 sentences. So let's review. T.A.G.S.T stands for title, author, genre, summary, and thesis. The T.A.G.S.T formula looks like this: title plus author plus genre plus summary plus your thesis equals a solid introduction. Let's review the steps. Step number 1. Be sure you have your title, author, genre, and thesis ready before you begin writing your introduction. Step number 2. Address your essay prompt in the opening sentence of your introduction using keywords from the prompt to help you. Step number 3. Write a brief 2 to 3 sentence bare bones summary of the piece of literature you are writing about, incorporating its title, author, and genre, the T.A.G. Finally, step number 4, create a lead-in transitional phrase or a full sentence lead-in to your thesis statement before adding it to the end of your introduction. Put your thesis statement at the end of your introduction and you are done. We want you to remember that there isn't just one way to write an introduction, but hopefully this formula will help if you are struggling to start writing one. Thank you for watching. For more writing tips videos, visit the MA Writing Center website at mawriting.com. If you are an MA student and need help with your writing, the MA Writing Center is open Monday through Thursdays from 3:15 to 4:30 on the MA campus while school is in session.